So in this video, I'm going to tell you how I lost my lower belly fat. For most of my life, I was overweight and out of shape and never thought that I'd be able to get a good physique. I thought that getting six-pack abs was only for celebrities or athletes or people with really great genetics. But fortunately, over the last few years, I've learned something that's really important, and that is that literally anybody can get into great shape, and it's actually pretty simple. So in this video, I'm going to share with you my stupid, simple system that allowed me to completely change my body without any of the overthinking. All right, guys, and just so you know, this is what I used to look like. I just want to show you this because I think one thing that's really important that I wish somebody would have told me is that the transformation that you might be looking for to go from out of shape and a little bit overweight to being lean and being jacked is actually not as difficult as you might think. And that's something that surprised me because I was able to just take a very few simple principles, apply that into my life, and just lost a lot of body fat and gained a lot of muscle as well. So I'll share exactly how you can do that as well. All right, guys, and for today's overview, here's the things that we're going to talk about to get you into good shape and allow you to change your body ASAP. First thing we're going to talk about is what most people get wrong. So we're going to go over spot reduction, what that means, people's hyperfixation on calories and why that's actually not as important as you might think, and yo-yo diets and extremes, which I call the fitness trap. Next thing we're going to talk about is how to easily fix these problems and build sustainability, because that's the most important thing. Is we want to change your physique and get you into good shape and then make it so that you can effortlessly keep that physique forever. So we'll talk about processed foods versus whole foods, how that contributes to your body's operation, how they are utilized differently in your body. Talk about nutrition and satiety, which is really the core of this whole video, and calorie balance. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is weightlifting and activity, some misconceptions, and why it's easier than you think it is. All right, guys, so in terms of what most people get wrong, so let's talk about spot reduction. So this is a big one that I hear a lot. Spot reduction is this idea that you can burn away fat from specific areas by working out that muscle group. So let's say that you wanted to get abs, right? So spot reduction is like, let's say you're 30% body fat, you're technically obese, and you want to get six-pack abs. So spot reduction would say, okay, all I need to do is just do this workout circuit that works my core out every single day, and that will allow me to burn away fat and get visible abs. That is not how it works. You hear this too when people say that they want to tone out, when people say, I want to tone my arms, I want to tone my legs. That is not how fat loss works. So fat loss is a quote unquote global process, meaning your body will utilize fat stores from all across your body. So if you're in a calorie deficit, your body might pull fat from your legs, your body might pull fat from your arms, your body might pull fat from your stomach. It just depends. A lot of it is dependent on your genetics. It doesn't really matter if you're working a certain muscle. Working the muscle will not burn fat away from that particular area, but what it will do is build that muscle to be bigger and stronger. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is hyperfixation on calories. So calorie deficit is literally the process of how your body loses fat. However, not all calories are created nutritionally equal. And I think this is something that the fitness space really skips over. You hear calories in, calories out. And while in a vacuum that does work as a principle, it's a little bit more complicated than that when it actually comes to your body. So 200 calories of junk food and processed food is going to do different things to your body than 200 calories of single ingredient clean whole foods. And then lastly, guys, a lot of people fall into the fitness trap. I certainly fell into it for multiple years, and this was probably the hardest lesson that I had to learn, was how to not yo-yo diet and live in the extremes. So this happens when people generally operate in a starve binge cycle. So what happens is people want to lose a lot of weight quickly, so they enter a very steep calorie deficit. Your body detects that you are nutrient deficient and calorie deficient and basically goes into survival mode. So hormones change, they get out of whack. Your hunger signaling goes crazy because your body basically thinks that you're starving. Generally, it results in pretty major nutrient deficiencies, which then result in your body releasing tons of really intense hunger signaling, which generally results in people binge eating really unhealthy, high fat, high carb foods. How we can easily fix these problems and build sustainability. This is good because the fixes to these problems that people run into, if you do it the right way, it's actually really easy to fix these problems and totally sustainably have a great physique all the time. So first thing, I always recommend to everybody, especially if you eat a lot of processed foods, which is basically 99% of people in America, is to do a junk reset. So a junk reset is where we eliminate all processed foods from your diet for the next 14 days. So for the next 2 weeks, we want to completely avoid any fast food, anything that lives on the shelf that comes in a bag or a wrapper. We are going to remove that from the diet for the next 2 weeks. And what this will allow us to do is reset our food frame and eliminate the cravings for the highly addictive, low quality food. Because guys, that processed food, if you look into the nefarious nature of how processed food is made, these companies literally do scientific research trying to figure out exactly how to get you the most addicted that you possibly can to their food. And if you've been consistently eating that stuff, your brain, it is likely that you are literally addicted to this. So I find that 2 weeks is a good amount of time to allow the cravings to tamper down and reset our food frame back to baseline. Most people live in a state of basically addiction to processed food. So we want to do a junk reset for the next 2 weeks. You will be amazed how big of a difference it will make to not have those constant cravings for junk. And looking back on it, you will realize, as I did, how addicted I was to those foods. Next thing I want us to do, guys, is to focus on high protein, high nutrient foods. It's really interesting because there are many people who are obscenely obese but nutrient deficient at the same time, which is such a weird condition that we've built in our society where you can literally be obese but be nutrient deficient. And that is just simply a result of the fact that the foods that we are eating are ultra high calorie with ultra low nutrition. So by focusing on a high protein, high nutrient food, we're allowing ourselves to actually fix our satiety signaling in our brain, because the issue with these ultra processed foods that are really high in calorie and low in nutrients is that they mess up our satiety signaling in our brain. Basically, we have all these calories flooding into our body, spiking our blood sugar levels, but at the same time, we're not really receiving a whole lot of nutritional benefits from it. And so that is a really confusing thing basically for our satiety. So you can end up in the state where you've eaten a ton of calories, a ton of food, and still feel deficient. So foods that I focus on eating a lot are things like steak, eggs, ground beef, lots of red meat and lean protein, as well as fruit and some dairy as well. I recommend doing the great-grandmother test. If your great-grandmother could recognize these foods, then it's probably okay to eat. But if you handed your great-grandmother a bag of Doritos, she would literally have no idea what she's looking at. So that's a pretty good way to understand if it's something that is overly processed or clean. Now also, guys, another important thing is I want to make sure that we don't drop calories super low. I think this is another mistake that people make, and it's a mistake that I made, and this is really where you can run into the starve binge cycle that keeps people trapped for a long time. And I want you to understand that yes, maintaining a steep calorie deficit will cause fat loss. Undoubtedly, if you are in a steep calorie deficit, you will absolutely lose body fat. However, the issue with this approach is it doesn't fix nutrient deficiency, and it leads to binging often. So it puts your body in basically a state of fight or flight, a state of hyper stress where your body essentially thinks that you are starving and goes into survival mode. You have turned off signals of abundance and you have basically turned on signals of scarcity. So your body is in this hyper stress state. Your hormones will be negatively impacted. You will notice generally higher levels of stress and anxiety. Your nervous system will be more active, again, because you're basically in survival mode. And oftentimes after doing all of this, where you're putting yourself in a higher stress state, most people will eventually just binge eat because you're going to have these crazy strong signals to eat really high fat and carb foods. And for most people, maintaining willpower to be in a state of starvation, especially when you're just surrounded by junk food all the time, is not something that you're going to be able to sustain. So what I recommend is, rather than focusing on dropping your calories super low, just focus on strictly eating clean, single ingredient whole foods. We know that people aren't getting fat if they are just only eating single ingredient whole foods. Nobody is getting fat off of eating too much steak and chicken and eggs and fruit. People are getting fat because they're eating too much processed foods. People in the 1960s and 1970s didn't have like these crazy lower appetites than modern day people. It's just that the access to foods was mostly just single ingredient whole foods, things that we as human beings have been eating a long period of time. It's only recently that we've just had this crazy abundance to ultra processed foods that are scientifically designed to make us addicted. And by the way, guys, I did just want to mention before we move on to the last part, if you're like me and benefit from having accountability whenever you are achieving your goals, then I have a coaching school called the Aesthetic School. And the whole purpose when I was building this school was basically to say, how can I take someone from being overweight and out of shape to jacked, lean, and Greek god status as quickly as humanly possible? And so if you're looking for an approach that literally would just take you step by step, leaving no stone unturned, no question unanswered, and you literally can just follow a program to a T and see quick and effective results, then that's what this is for. So I'll leave that link down below if you want to go check it out. But anyways, the last thing I want to talk about, guys, is weightlifting and activity. Now, one thing that's important to recognize is that having an aesthetic physique requires building muscle, not just fat loss. So if we're only losing fat, if we're only dieting, yes, we will absolutely get into better shape. But you have to understand, especially if you're a young man, the physique that you probably want is not only someone who's lean, but someone who is lean and has muscle mass. But the good news is this is actually the easier part of fitness. I think a lot of people who are new to fitness really dread the weightlifting part, but trust me when I say the weightlifting part is actually the easier part of fitness. Really, you only need to be in the gym about 2 to 3 times a week lifting weights, and you only need about 30 to 45 minutes per session. So that is not a huge time commitment. People ask me about cardio too, and I really don't do cardio. I literally just focus on getting steps in. So I just make a concerted effort to try to walk a little bit more throughout the day and try to get about 10,000 steps a day. But that is literally the only cardio that I do. So if you're new, if you only go 2 to 3 times a week, 30 to 45 minutes per session, and just try to hit that 10,000 step mark a day, and also implement the diet that we just talked about, you are literally going to be a new person within the next 2 to 3 months. It's going to be a radical change. You will feel better, you will look better, you won't be addicted to junk food anymore, and now that your body has actual nutrients to utilize, you're gonna freaking look like Superman. But yeah, guys, that is how I lost my lower belly fat. That is how I got jacked, how I got lean, and I hope that this video helps you too. If you found this to be valuable, make sure you leave a like, make sure you subscribe. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.